As a member of the Electoral Matters Committee since 1998 until 2010, I was astounded when, during an inquiry into the 2004 elections, coalition members claimed that these changes were necessary to prevent false enrolments. This was despite the fact that the Australian Electoral Commission had testified that there was no problem with false enrolments in Australia. So these measures introduced by the previous government to prevent and suppress voters, especially young voters, were done on the basis of no evidence. No evidence. It's outrageous to think that those on the other side of the aisle do not support such legislation that seeks to amend the disenfranchisement of Australian citizens. It is shocking that for so long the Coalition has been able to get away with denying Australian citizens their right to vote. The Coalition's atrocious legislation in 2006 has in fact prevented young people in Australia and many others having their say in who represents them in this chamber. If we look at what occurred at the last election in 2010, we will see as a result of this suppression of Australian citizens' right to vote that there exists a democratic deficit in our electoral system. Looking at the components of those who did not cast a valid vote at the last elections, I said the overall numbers were 2.5 million Australians were affected. Even if the member for Mackellar was theoretically concerned about false enrolments, of which she cited no evidence, which the Electoral Commission said there was no evidence, and which she and her associates have not been able to produce in this House, she would at least have to, if she was being taken seriously, balance it against the fact that there are 2.5 million Australians who did not participate in the last election. Surely that is the act of a responsible person in this Parliament. Of the 2.5 million Australians, 1.4 million were not enrolled, 729,000 were enrolled but did not show up, 400,000 cast an informal ballot, and finally there were 166,000 provisionals who thought they'd cast a valid vote but they were excluded. Out of 15 million people of voting age, 1 in 6 Australians had no say at the last election. This is a disgrace. This legislation is the beginning of an attempt by this government to see that the majority of Australians are enfranchised, and I'm very pleased to see that the democratic ethos that informs our views on this has begun with these moves by the Special Minister of State. I strongly support them. I'm sure the Australian people will support them, and I know this House will support them.